Hello, my name's Ian Gray, and in this episode of the Go Live with Confidence show, I'm joined by actor and teacher David H. Lawrence, and we're talking about how to boost your live stream camera confidence. We'll be with you just after this.
Want to boost your confidence in front of the camera so you can live stream more effectively and communicate with your audience? Get ready for the Go Live with Confidence show. Increase your confidence, improve your communication, and optimize your mindset so you can go live with confidence. This show is powered by Restream. And here's your host, Ian Anderson Gray.
Well, hello, this is episode 10 of the Go Live with Confidence show. This show is powered by Restream, and we're all about helping you increase your confidence, improve your communication, and optimize your mindset so that you can go live with confidence. Now, we go live every Tuesday. I normally say at 5 p.m. in the UK, but it's actually 4 p.m. today because we haven't done gone out of daylight saving times or whatever it is. I get so confused. But it is 12 noon Eastern, and I believe 9 a.m. Pacific. We broadcast to a plethora of different destinations using the power of Restream. And if you haven't checked out Restream, you need to check it out. All you need to do is go to iag.me/Restream, and you can take it for a test drive. Today we're using Restream Studio. It gives you the ability to bring up to 9 guests onto your show, stream to all those different platforms, see all the comments from all those different places as well, and I absolutely love it. Well, in today's show, I'm very excited to be joined by David H. Lawrence the 17th, and it's quite funny. I was going through my notes there, and I saw the Roman numerals, and I got a little bit confused because I think I put David H. Lawrence the 12th, which wasn't the right one to do. But David H. Lawrence the 17th has appeared on Lost, How I Met Your Mother, The Mentalist, CSI, and is best known as the creepy evil puppet master Eric Doyle on NBC's Heroes. David teaches voiceover at voheroes.com, and he created the best-selling app for actors, which is Rehearsal Pro. It's time to bring in David. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. I'm surviving life in a good way. So I want to ask you, do you get people that stumble over your Roman numerals at the end very often?
Oh, all the time. In fact, the only number I haven't gotten was like the first. But everybody else is like trying to figure it out, and it's like crazy.
But that's fun. That's fun. We need to get this out of the way. So you were on my show, my other show, the Confident Live show last week, and we said this. But obviously, people are going to ask, what's with the Roman numerals? You're obviously royalty.
Yes, that's exactly right. No, there were 16 other David Lawrences in SAG. It was SAG when I joined back in the early 2000s. And I remember being on the telephone with the woman from the union saying, nope, can't use that one. Nope, can't use that one. Just variations of my name. And I was staring at my IMDb page trying to figure out a way to do it. And I noticed that in parentheses after my name, it said XVII 17. And I'm like, just as a joke, I said, what do you think about David H. Lawrence the 17th? And she said, great, click. So there I was.
And the rest is history. So
that's right.
There we go. Well, I think it's great. I think it's great. I've always liked the full name, David H. Lawrence the 17th. It's just obviously when you're on a live show and you see the Roman numerals and you get them all mixed up, something happens to your brain. But that's what we're going to be talking about today, about getting more confident in front of the camera. And maybe, I don't know what you think about this. I see a lot of people talking about this in the live video space. A lot of people talking about leaning into your flaws and owning your mistakes when you stumble over things. What's your view on that when it comes to live video?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing that really draws your audience to you, if you're worried about, I have to be perfect, I have to create a better version of myself because what I am isn't enough for anybody to pay attention. I mean, it's a human frailty to think you're not good enough. And the truth of the matter is that your little teeny tiny foibles, your little imperfections are the things that really connect you to other people, because other people go, oh, he's like me. She's just like me. And the real deal is to be as authentic as you possibly can. I say there are 3 A's to being really excellent on live video. And the first one is authenticity. When you're your authentic self, you can't help but connect better with your audience. The other two are agility, and I forget what the third one is.
It's something very good though. I was going to say, does COVID hair?
It's authority. It's authority.
Oh, okay. Authority.
I had to look down on my index card to see what the hell I said.
I was going to ask you, does COVID hair come into this? Because I was thinking, I need my haircut, and I was starting to think, I have to go live.
You're
I have to go live.
You're rubbing it in that you actually have hair. Is that right? Is that what you're doing to me?
I wasn't, but and now that you say that, let's move on. Carl Sullivan's saying, we were talking about just before we started, what the way you pronounce WhatsApp, and David was giving me some tutoring on that. So yeah, that is true. We've got no, I'm going to mispronounce this. Lisetia, watching from South Africa. Awesome to see you. One of these days I will meet, I will actually go to South Africa. Have you ever been to South Africa, David?
I have not, but I have been to Leicestershire.
To where?
Leicestershire.
That's my next one.
Yeah.
Leicestershire.
Of course, it's Leicestershire. Okay.
Yeah, you can't expect British place names to make any sense in the pronunciation department.
Especially when you go to Wales. Just forget about it. Just forget about it.
Well, that's true. I don't live too far from Wales, but I can't pronounce the name. So, Ella, great to see you. Hope you're doing really well.
Ella.
And Shannon's saying, what's Shannon saying? Just pinging people in. And we also, Beyond says, we do a live podcast with guests. It's all about rallying, all about motorsport.
No. He does a live podcast with quests. There's a big difference. Yeah.
I thought it said guests. I'm being dyslexic.
Doesn't that say quests?
It does say quests.
I'm looking at my Restream monitor and it says quests.
That's true. Quests. Awesome. I'd like to know more about that. Martin is watching from Toronto in Canada. And Shannon is also saying, thanks for clearing that up. Present over perfect. I remind myself of that on my lives for sure. And Carl's...
and again, not to correct you, I'm going to spend the whole show doing that. I think she means present over perfect. Right?
What did I say?
Present.
Okay,
like
yes.
Presenting something, right? And I think there's a big difference there. It kind of ties in with what I said. So if you could just give me a second. The presenters are the biggest bane to live video people that are doing live video and trying to be real. They've seen presenters on the BBC and on NBC and on CBS here in the States and all around the world, and they think they have to have this stature and this presentation that distances themselves from their audience. And so present, just being aware of what's going on around you really helps you connect a lot faster than having some sort of suit of armor that you put on. So I'm glad she posted that. Yeah,
definitely. Well, you could be presenting in front of the camera, or it could be just being there, just being present.
Well, now look at her next comment and you tell me.
Okay. I feel I'm on trial today. Yep.
You are on trial, sir. You know why? Because I didn't get my cinnamon rolls this morning. That's why.
Dear. I'm going to have to check with you. Yeah, never get David on early morning. It's not good.
This is so different from last week's show, isn't it?
It is.
It's like I'm ornery or something.
You're like a different person. It's hilarious. Oh dear. Right. Well, so I've got some questions in front of me that I was going to ask you, and obviously we'll see what happens. But I want to know, first of all, how did you get into acting? You do a lot of things these days. Acting is one of those things. You do a lot of voiceover stuff, but and you did a lot of radio in the past. So tell us a little brief history of how you got into what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I did radio for about 35 years. And after a while in radio, I was working as a morning guy. I was doing syndicated radio. And when I was in New York City and DC, I would get asked to occasionally do show up on stage as like some sort of a crank casting. But I always wondered about doing on camera as well as doing voice on mic. And It was the weather in DC that drove me away, because they have no idea what they're doing there. They're just, there's no snow removal services, and they get dumped on every year. So finally, I wanted to get out of Dodge, and I moved to Los Angeles in the early 2000s because I figured this beautiful face and this amazing physique was going to just kill it as a leading man on camera. I really wanted to see if I could do what I did on radio, on television, and in film. And so I studied for about probably 4 years. And then my first big booking was on Heroes.
Cool. Yeah. So that was your first one.
It was.
I'd love to know, if you're watching, did you watch Heroes, and were you scared by David's character? Tell us a bit more about the character that you played on that, if people haven't heard of it.
People that watched the show past the second season, when there was a writer's strike here in the United States, season 3, 4, and 5 included Eric Doyle, who was the puppet master. He would control people. And it's funny because I don't have a mean bone in my body. I really don't. I'm not evil, even though I've spent this whole time just really torturing you.
I know.
There was a time when I went to it's called Dragon Con. It's like Comic-Con, or like your MCM. And a guy walked up to me. I was signing autographs and pictures, and he goes, "Could you do one for Jeannie?" And I'm like, "Are you Jeannie?" No, that's my wife. And I'm like, "Well, where is she?" "Oh, she's hiding over there behind the pillar because she's scared to death of you." And I'm like, I'm not, like, that's not me. And I looked at her, and she, so I thought that I would be like goofball, crazy uncle, neighbor over the fence, that kind of character. And what I was handed was creepy, evil villain. So you never know.
I think that's probably a fun character to play, the evil characters.
Gosh. Yeah. Villains are the best.
Yeah.
They have the best lines. They get the funny lines. They have the coolest layers. They have the most awesome weapons. Usually there's a really hot woman with them for some strange reason. I don't know. So yeah, I mean, it's so much fun to play a villain.
So you coped with the role. That's great. It is funny that some people, they can't tell the difference between the person that the actor is playing and the actor themselves. I mean, I see this so often, and I wonder whether we can take anything from that when it comes to live video. And if we get in front of the camera and we're so different to our real to us as our actual selves, if we're trying to put on this act and become a different person in front of the camera, then when people meet us in real life or work with us as a client relationship, it's not good. So do you think there's something that we can learn from that when it comes to getting in front of the camera with live video?
Well, it depends on what you're doing. There's many personas that people can assume when they're doing live video. If you're just being yourself, or you're being a coach or whatever, that's one thing. If you're being a news presenter, that's something a little bit different. You have to have a certain approach to that. You need to kind of amp up the authority. If you're on a podcast with a partner and you're the straight guy and, she's the funny one, you kind of have to play that. And who knows whether you have to assume a role or not. But usually we make the wrong assumption with that, because I would imagine most of the people watching you are serving their followers, their tribe. They're providing them information, or they're providing them support in a particular area, or they're teaching them something, or they're helping them get better at something. And in that approach, that sort of avatar, you really want to be as unencumbered with artifice as you can. You want to be as real as you possibly can be. And, there are times when I kind of break down when I'm on camera, because I get emotional about things. I remember talking about some abuse that I suffered at the hands of a step parent. And I remember it just became like a blubber fest. It was just like all this stuff was coming out. And I almost didn't publish that because I was so embarrassed for what I'd been doing. And I took a risk, and I did, and hardly did I get criticism or were people upset. They were really supportive. And so when you are your true authentic self on camera, and I know that how hard that is. I really do. I know how hard it is to just let go of the notion that you instantly have to build a better version of yourself to do well on camera. Because you just, I see it all the time with my voiceover clients. They're like, my normal voice, that's what I should use. And I'm like, yeah, the one you use falling out of bed, the one that you use every day when you're yelling at somebody, or when you're coaxing somebody, or when you're being really happy. Just be you. Just let you shine through. And it's just such a hard thing for some people to wrap their heads around, that that's an advantage over creating some persona that you think is better than what you are.
Oh, it's so true. I see this all the time. I see this certainly in my life and my clients and people I speak to all the time. And I think part of that is that I don't know what it's been like in your experience, but a lot of people are comparing themselves with other people, and they look at what other people are doing and think, particularly in the live video space, they think they need to put much more energy into it. And although I think you do need to put more energy probably than you think you do, you don't have to become anyone else other than yourself. Do you think this comparison thing is a big issue?
Yeah, I think it's that. And I think it's also examples, whether you're comparing yourself or not. You see so many examples. I mean, if you rewind to the beginning of this podcast, of this presentation, you'll hear Ian let's talk about Ian as though he isn't really here, okay? You'll hear Ian amp up the energy as he gets going, and then he settles in once he starts chatting with me. And, it's just the nature of the beast. You're presenting a show, you're beginning with a title, and you've got an intro, and it's on I don't know if you're using a teleprompter or not, but you've got words that you've already written down and you're saying. And so it changes things a little bit. And one of the tricks that I find really helps people switch over to that next level is to just let yourself be you from the beginning. Even if it's not mass pandemonium as you start off with your theme and all that sort of thing. In fact, when I designed my podcast, my video podcast, which I hadn't done in a long time, but in 2019, I did a video every single day of the year so that I could up my game. And I purposely started with a format of 20 seconds or so with an intro, then the open, and then out of the open back into my normal self. And it really aided me in keeping sort of an emotional level that was accessible and sustainable, right? And this is something I learned very early in radio, because in radio, I started off in top 40. And I just wanted to be that pukey DJ guy, right? And so everything was yelling. Everything was raising your voice. And when I got to do talk radio, you can't talk about divisive issues like that screaming. You just can't. You got to kind of calm down and just have a conversation with people, right? So I think the notion that other people do things a particular way, okay, that must be the way to do it. Right? Look at Graham Norton. Graham Norton violates every single rule of chat shows, of talk shows, as we call them here in the States. He sits on the wrong side of the stage. He gets people to be involved with him on a personal level, and when they do the chair thing, like all that stuff that he kind of, created for himself to take advantage of his skill set, is something that for traditional talk shows was way out there. And nobody has ever done anything but reward him for that. So I think I'm meandering at this point. So I'll just...
No, but it's good meandering. And and I think it's just tiring trying to be somebody else. Just be yourself, and you'll attract people for who you are.
That's a lot of people, I think, true.
Because I think, so many of us, when we hear our own voice or look at ourselves on camera, we don't like what we see. I really struggled with this, and I think now I think I would probably say I accept myself. I wouldn't say I love the way I look or sound, but I'm okay with it now. So it's a journey. How about yourself when you see yourself on camera?
Mean, one of the most often asked questions on Quora. Are you on Quora at all?
Yeah, Quora, yeah.
Okay. So one of the most often asked questions of voice people is, why do I sound like Mickey Mouse when I hear myself played back on a tape recorder? Right. Yeah. And I think, first of all, tape recorder? Really? But when you record your voice and then you play it back, you're missing something. When you're talking, you hear yourself two different ways. You hear yourself through the air, convectively, off the walls and other people and so on. And it's the same thing they hear. And then at the very same time, but slightly behind that convective sound, is the conductive sound from your voice up through the muscles and the bones of your skull and then into your ear. And you can hear that portion of your voice by simply covering your ears and talking. You've heard that very bassy, very muffled sound, but that's added to the convective sound that you hear. And so you hear yourself with more bass than other people hear you. And so when you think about people like Barry White and others that have had really, really deep voices, you think, wow, wonder what they're hearing. They're hearing like they've got Sony, Boom headphones, right? Or Beats headphones. So you don't have to worry that what you hear sounds tinny to you, because it doesn't sound tinny to others.
Yeah, it's trusting in the process, maybe. Sure. What do you say? Yeah.
Yeah.
Shannon is saying, loved Heroes, and we've got a few Heroes fans here. We've got Louis, who says, Heroes was my favorite show, and I remember you as the puppet master, and you're still here. You've not been scared away, which is great. Tech for Text says, loved Heroes, puppet master. What else have we got here? So Louis says, a lot of my co-host and myself on two crazy Latinas act the same way in real life. Two funny and crazy people. Yes, it's the best way to be. Martin says, I hate hearing my voice. So any tips? And Shannon says, interesting. Any tips on how to not hate our own voice and perhaps even get to the point of loving the sound of our own voice? Do you think that's important?
Yeah, I do. I think, well, at the very least, you need to accept it and enjoy it and embrace it and celebrate it. You may never love your voice, but when you're able to accomplish things, when you're able to make other people's lives better, when you're able to tell amazing stories and create emotional reactions, make people laugh, make people cry, make people think simply by being your true, authentic self, take that as a gift, because so many people never get to that point. They never give themselves the permission to step into their power and to step into their voice. And one of the things that I do as a voice coach is really try to implore my clients not to sound, bassy and loud and formal, but to really understand that, your true authentic self is the self that connects the fastest and connects the surest. So I find it hard sometimes for people to accept that. And usually it's because they've never been given that gift from other people. Oh my gosh, I love your voice. Or, oh my gosh, you tell such great stories, or you're so funny. Oftentimes people are brought up by parents that are not supportive and in fact, sometimes destructive. Or they grow up in an environment where it's very competitive. I can always tell when one of my clients is from a really big family because they talk a mile a minute. They were brought up, if they didn't get their story and their words in edgewise, they were never going to be heard. And so that often tends to be the case. But this notion of accepting yourself and really giving yourself the opportunities that you deserve is hard for some people to accept. It's hard for some people to go after.
That's fascinating. I hadn't thought about that. And I wonder, so many of us don't get that encouragement. Nobody, when was the last time, I'd be interested if you're watching live or the replay, when was the last time you complimented somebody on their voice, on their accent? I'm trying to think. I don't think of it in a long time. I'm trying to think if I ever have. You know what? You've got a great voice. We just don't do it. And I just wonder whether we could do with encouraging people.
That doesn't mean that you have a bad voice. That's what some people, they haven't heard really great compliments on their voice, and so they think, oh my God, my voice must be awful. Nobody ever says I have a good voice, and that's not true. That's not true. Yeah. Come on now.
Absolutely. And it is about being authentic. I know the word authenticity is kind of maybe overused, but I think it's so important. And we talked a lot about voice and audio, and that's deliberate. I mean, you're a voiceover coach,
but it's so important for video.
Yeah, it
is so important for video.
It's kind of funny that I'm sure you get this too, but the first question that I get most of the time is, how do I improve my camera, the way I look? And, if you're looking at David's setup, I mean, your setup is amazing. You've presumably got a DSLR, you've got a great background. That looks great. But actually, if you had, if your sound wasn't good, if you were using a very tinny microphone and you were lots of background noise, I think people would turn off. Well, maybe they wouldn't because it's you, but you know what I mean? It makes the
number one reason. It's the number one reason why people tune out of videos on YouTube. Yeah. Google has said this a million times. Bad audio will drive people away faster than bad video because they're used to bad video. They're used to people shooting with their cell phone in portrait mode up their nose. People are used to that. But when they can't understand you, or the audio is so noisy, or just so poorly recorded off in the distance with all kinds of background noise, people get fatigued very quickly trying to understand what you're doing. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Very true. Well, we're going to get onto cameras in a bit, but I do want to kind of focus more on this. So we've talked a lot about the mindset side of things, and I think you would agree the mindset side of things when it comes to your voice and camera is so important. Mark Orr is here. Great to see you, Mark. And you work with video with lots of clients, and you say to your clients, do people cringe when you talk to them? No one ever said yes, and that's true. But I think, often we are the worst critic of ourselves. It's not other people. Sure. I mean, I say, if you were to treat a client of yours the way you treat yourself, you'd be sacked in no time, most of the time, Yeah. So there's the mindset side of things, but let's focus a little bit maybe more on vocal production. So we've done mindset. Let's talk about vocal production, and then we'll maybe get onto the tech side of things, microphones and things like that. So any tips for us in terms of how we sit or stand, or anything else that we should be thinking about in terms of our voices when we go live?
I'm contrarian when it comes to that sort of thing. A lot of people will do a lot of vocal exercises before they sit down in front of a camera. And, when I'm asked what my vocal exercises are, I say, I just have one. I sit and then I go,
yeah.
And I go. And people say, well, I have to stand while I do voice work. The only time I stand when I'm doing voice work is when I'm doing animation, when I'm working in a room with a bunch of people and the mics are set up for standing. When I do an audiobook, I would kill myself if I was standing. And people think, oh, it cramps your diaphragm. Well, I'll ask you, do you feel like as you're listening to me, do you feel like my diaphragm is cramped?
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
But
we somehow sit at the dinner table and we talk just fine. But, if you're singing, and you're singing something that really requires you to do really great breath control, then I would say absolutely do what makes yourself comfortable. But doing voiceover, I hardly ever stand, and I don't think that in general it's necessary. It depends on what your video is. If you're doing stand-up on video, if you're doing presentation and you're standing, well, then, wear a lav or have an overhead boom mic set up or whatever you want. But I just don't think you have to stand. A lot of people worry about that. So,
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I think maybe it's down to personal preference, whatever makes you feel comfortable. I personally prefer to stand because I just I get more energy that way. If I sit down, I tend to slouch, and the only thing I'm aware of is when I stand, and is that sometimes I will maybe sway, and if you're sitting down, you get rid of that. So I suppose there are pros and cons with both, and you got to do whatever.
Well, my question to you is, why do you think slouching is bad? I've been slouching this whole time. Right? I mean, seriously, why do you think you need more energy? Your energy is just fine.
Yeah.
And sometimes we make these assumptions, and you're absolutely right. When you do stand, when I'm doing animation, I'm doing really quick, short bursts of sound, and then I sit down and other people do their work. But if you're standing for 2 hours, you're going to start shifting your weight, and how you address a microphone is just as important as the microphone itself. I can take a not so good microphone and show you how to maximize the sound that you get from it if you know how to address it. If you don't know how to address it, you can really screw up a really good microphone as well. So, I think sometimes we make assumptions that aren't necessarily true.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, that's fascinating stuff. So we've talked about mindset, we've talked about other things, and time to talk about the tech when it comes to microphones. Anything that we should be thinking about when it comes to this? How important is the microphone that we use in the audio tech side of things?
Again, it's really, really critical to what people see and hear at the same time. Sometimes we will use a microphone that is on a separate sort of input channel to our computers, and the video is slightly ahead of the audio, or the audio is slightly ahead of the video. And so I remember when I was using a USB microphone because I love my AT2020 USB Plus. It's actually what I use for all my voiceover. And people are like, what? You don't use a Neumann? You don't use a Sennheiser? What's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong with me, and I make my living doing this. So you can ask me again, and the answer is the same. But if it becomes distracting, you have to fix that. And one of the things that really helps is to have a microphone you can rely on, and a microphone that you don't have to set up every time. I see people using lavaliers all the time, and lavaliers have a particular use, and they have a particular pickup and sound that may or may not be the best for doing online video if you're just kind of staying in place. If you're moving around, if you're teaching yoga, or you're teaching fitness, or you're walking and talking, you see newspaper or television reporters doing what are called walk and talks, right? If that's what's going on, then yeah, you have to have that, because then you'd either need that or you'd need a sound man or a sound woman to follow you around. But you can get much better sound when you're doing video by using a shotgun microphone that is set up so that it's aimed at your mouth, but it's not in the camera frame. It's not I know exactly that you do this, and you've looked this way for a long time. You use what's called a close play voiceover microphone. That microphone, the Heil, is a microphone that you need to be right next to get good response from. You couldn't put it a distance away from you. But then there are microphones that you could use that are like, my microphone is totally out of frame, and yet it gives me full fidelity, and I don't have to worry about it. I can move, I can change my face, I can, there's all kinds of things. And then you also want to be careful about how you monitor that sound, especially if you're doing chat back and forth. Can you hear the host? Can you hear the guest? Things like that. But so depending upon what your podcast is aiming to accomplish, that's how you select your microphone for what you're going to do.
That's great stuff. So yeah, it could be a dynamic microphone like this, but obviously that has to be close up. But the one that you use is a shotgun microphone, so that's out of shot, and it's just there all the time. You just need to sit down and turn up and get on with the live video. And I think removing any obstacles for us going live is a good thing.
Oh my God.
I know people that have to set up like a green screen and put lights up and all that kind of stuff. If you do that, you're giving yourself even more excuses not to go live.
Yeah, and I get that some people don't have the space
Yeah.
to have something set up. I'm fortunate. I have a space. I'm sure you have a space. I think you probably have done what I suggest most people do, and that is create a space that doesn't serve any other purpose than to have you on camera. You don't have to set up all your stuff every time, right?
No, I don't.
Yeah. So that means you have all of this worry gone, right? The lights are where they're supposed to be. The camera's locked down. The microphone is where it's supposed to be. Occasionally you might have to, focus yourself, but for the most part, it's all set and ready to go. Like when I got set up here today, I've hardwired my lights into the ceiling and they're actually connected to switches on the wall. So I come in, I flip up 3 switches for my fill, my key, and my backlight, flip on my camera and my microphone and boot my computer. And literally within 30 seconds, I'm ready to go. And when you don't have that convenience, it weighs on you. It's one more thing or 7 more things that you have to worry about.
Yeah.
So why not worry about that?
We all need fewer worries in life. We definitely do. I've meant to say earlier that there's a newish feature in Restream. So if you're using Restream Studio, this is great. If you have a guest, you can actually alter the levels of you and your guests in real time. So a good thing to do, which we should have done actually earlier, is to speak just to get the right levels. And then I can, in Studio, I can increase my volume and put David's down and get the right level. So that's a new cool feature. Check that out in Restream Studio. I can see Mark Orr is here and says, so Mark, you were here before, weren't you? But you said, I use a Sennheiser shotgun and love that it's out of shot. I'm thinking of getting a shotgun microphone as well. So for the episodes where I do a live show into a podcast for my other show, I can use this, and for some of my other shows, I've got the shotgun mic. What do you think of that as an idea?
So again, you can do that if you want to, but you'd be very surprised. I use this microphone, and I put out an audio version as well as a video version of my podcast. And the presence on mic he's using, I'm assuming, a MKH 416, which is like an $1,100 microphone. I'm using a $40 microphone. And I love it because it's from Audio-Technica. It's the ATR 6550, I think it is. It just happens to be a microphone that is a unicorn. It's a beautiful microphone. It works perfectly. It plugs right into my DSLR, and it's set up about, say, 2 feet away from me, maybe 1.5 feet. But it's below frame and you can't see it. And when I'm doing the podcast, if you go to voheroes.com and click on, I think it's the articles or whatever, if you find my articles, you'll see all the videos that I make, and you can play the audio underneath. There's an audio player. I'm on, what do I use for my podcast platform? Why can't I remember? Anyway, it's because I didn't have any cinnamon rolls. But people have said, do you use a separate microphone for your audio one? Because it sounds great. The only difference there is you're not being given visual stimulus. So people will play the audio, and if they go up and play the audio is exactly the same. I use ScreenFlow to edit all my video work. I love ScreenFlow, and all I do to put out the audio version of my podcast is to export the audio from ScreenFlow as an AIFF file, and then I convert it to an MP3, and that's it. I don't do anything to it. I don't sweeten it. I don't do anything to it. And I've had people say that more than once, but it's just that thing in your brain where when you have a visual stimulus along with an auditory stimulus, you tend to treat both very differently. But when you hear audio all by itself, your brain fills in the rest, and it sounds so much better than you'd think it would.
That's fascinating. I think you're right. It's amazing what the brain can do. You know, my background is music, and there's just thinking about, like, for example, Bach's cello suites. There's just like one line, the cello playing this one line, but your brain fills in the gaps. You can hear all the harmony, and I think it's probably the same in your voice. If you don't, maybe, you know, if you're speaking through a different microphone that doesn't have maybe quite as much as the depth, you're still going to fill in the gaps, which is really interesting. Now, Steve is asking a question which I'm sure you get all the time, but I'm interested in this. So Steve asks, any suggestions on reducing A's, or I assume that's ers as well, while talking filler words? I drive myself crazy when doing this.
Yeah.
Does it matter?
Part of it is realizing what you're doing and why you're doing it. And once you do realize that, and you give yourself the permission to not worry about that so much, here's what's going on. These vocalization bridges or filler words are there because you're afraid that if you don't fill in the vacuum of silence, that people will stop listening to you. They'll find somebody more interesting at the party. We've all had this experience where we're talking to somebody and they're like, and they're looking around to see if there's anybody else they can talk to, and that's insulting, right? When you use those words, the more judiciously you use them, the better. And once you accept that, you'll realize the value of silence. If you simply pause, that is so out of the ordinary that people will be snapped back to attention to you. If you pause, as opposed to saying, so if you pause, like not say anything, if you pause and then continue talking, that is one of the most powerful vocal tools you can have. The best speakers in the world from the stage, the motivational speakers and the self-help speakers and the people who are inspirational, they simply use silence the way graphic designers use negative space, white space. It's yet another brush to paint with as a voice talent. So once you realize that and you say, oh, this gives me an advantage. All right, fine. I'm going to train myself not to worry that somebody's attention is going to be lost. And I'm going to try to use silence and watch what happens. And once you see people going, are you okay? Did you have a medical incident? What happened there? Once you use silence successfully, it becomes this rewarding thing that you can do over and over again. And eventually you will, for the most part, drop the vocalization bridges. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't happen from time to time. And vocalization bridges can be used as a dramatic element themselves. So as you begin a sentence, that can give you an extra second or so to try and figure out what the answer is going to be to the question you were just asked, right? That's the California so. Also phrases, when people ask you a question and you don't quite know the answer yet, but if you just give me a second and I'll figure it out, you can say that. And that's so out of the ordinary and so honest that it's disarming. But you can also say, so it's really interesting. That's really interesting, while you're putting your thoughts together, as opposed to like, so yeah, doing those things to try and keep the bridge together. You don't need to do that.
Really good advice. And embracing the silence is a very scary thing to do. You mentioned this on this show last time, and it can be the first time it happens. I mean, actually, when you put silence into your speaking, I start to worry as a host or the producer, because I'm thinking, oh, what's happened to the tech? Is there something going wrong? But that, I think it does do that thing. It does make people stop, look, and listen.
Let me give you a great example. I'm sure everyone here, maybe a few people didn't, but I'm sure everyone here by now has seen Oprah Winfrey's interview with Meghan and Harry. And when Meghan first says there was some concern about what the color of the baby's skin was, just watch that clip. Now, part of this is the editor doing this, and I credit her for doing this, the editor for doing this. But you see Oprah going, what? Like they hang on her with her jaw dropped, and they allow that moment of absolute shock to register. And then they go a little bit more, and it registers even deeper. And then very quietly she says, what? Like she can't possibly fathom how that could be real. So it can be used as a dramatic dramatic device as well.
Yeah, definitely. But obviously when you're live, you don't have a very clever editor to do all of that. So you've got to, I suppose this is...
No, but you can do that without
practice.
editors. No, you can do that without an editor. And you have to lose the fear that if you choose to do that, people will instantly tune out.
Yeah.
They won't. In fact, they'll be drawn to the screen because they want to figure out if maybe their tech is gone, but then they see your face.
Yeah.
And you're in shock, or you're surprised, or you're quizzical, or whatever it is. And all of these little flavors are also things that are hard for people to imagine they can put to use in live video, right? We tend to have this narrow envelope of emotion when we're doing live video, as opposed to being wacky and surprised and subdued and fearful and sad and all of the things that we do in normal everyday life, we think couldn't possibly be useful in live video, because all those really hyper Gary Vaynerchuk type people, they're just screaming consistently into the microphone. They're not letting anybody get a word in edgewise. They're not doing anything to slow down. They're doing it because they have that energy, and they're doing a 4-hour work week. And yeah, what about you? What about you? What little flavors can you add to your presentation with a microphone and a camera that can pick those up? What can you do to be more you as opposed to more them? So.
Love that. And Ella is also agreeing, saying, love what David just said about using silence in the same way graphic designers use negative space. Mark wants to ask a question, and I'd be interested to know your thoughts on this. I'd love to know David's take on speed of talking. How can we slow some guests down so they sound better? Or maybe some guests speak too slowly and you have to speed them up. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to be the kind of person that says, don't try to manage your guests. I'm answering a different question, but I get it. You want them to be more like you. You want them to be better at what they do. When you think about how the Queen speaks versus how Dr. Fauci here in the United States, our number one pandemic expert, speaks. He's very much up here. He has a Philadelphia accent, a Long Island accent, a little bit of both because he's lived both places. And he tends to talk with a kind of a cadence and a pattern that, people get used to. Whereas the Queen, nobody's telling the Queen to speed it up. The Queen is sitting there with her legs crossed at the ankles, very demurely, and very, very pure received pronunciation, and at a level that must drive sound guys crazy, right? Because she speaks very softly. And yet, somehow, she's very effective. And I know that you want your show to be high energy and to be, or whatever you want your show to be. I don't know what your show is, but Mark, if you really want to give yourself a break, let them be themselves. Give them the opportunity to be themselves. And if it doesn't serve your show, don't book them in the future. But I remember when I was on radio, I used to have my producer kind of coach people, especially if they'd never been on the radio before. And she would tell them many of the things that I'm telling you here today. Just be yourself. You know, David's not an ogre. David's not, you know, a goofball. He's not stupid. You know, you don't have to worry about him mistreating you or insulting you or embarrassing you. But that's about it. I wanted them to be authentic as well. And if they choose to be high energy, great. If they choose to be varied or low energy or just sort of normal people, that's them. And I want to honor that. So I guess the answer, I'm not really answering your question. I apologize for that, but I'm answering a different question that might be just as useful.
I think so. We want people to be themselves. And I wonder whether when people, you know, in our conversation, I wonder whether sometimes we adjust the way we talk depending on the person that we speak to. I don't know if you know, do you know Molly Mahoney? She's in the live video space. She's very, very high energy. And I find myself when I'm talking to her, I can't help but put more energy into to keep up with her almost. And so maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
Well, it's mirroring. I mean, we want to fit in with other people. And so the NLP practitioner in me says we tend to, when we want somebody to like us, when we want to connect with them and be on their map and understand their behaviors and environment and their emotional state and so on, we tend to match their presentation style. I tend to notice that very early on. And if it's serving things, great. But it can become a competition.
Yeah.
And I prefer to create contrast. So I try to stay as much true to myself as I possibly can. I mean, this is how I talk to people when I'm at dinner with them or when I'm talking to my daughters. I have a daughter who is a session singer in Nashville. And I have another daughter who works for the Washington, D.C. sports teams. And they somehow became like me. I don't know how this was, but they have this very emotive but varied presentation. And I just found out that my daughter in Nashville, to supplement her earnings, is now narrating audiobooks. And I'm like, wait, what? And she's great. Oh my God, she's fantastic. So anyway.
That's funny. Yeah, I think you're so right. I think part of it maybe is, it is, we mimic people, not deliberately necessarily, but because we want to be liked. But sometimes it can be survival. I mean, I moved to Scotland when I was at like 12, and I got teased for having an English accent. So I had to get a Scottish accent pretty quickly, and then moved down to England and had to get an English accent pretty quickly for survival. And then maybe that stuck. I don't know. But looking at the time, we've only got a few minutes left, and
oh my gosh.
Interestingly, I was going to ask you loads about camera technique and things like that. We've actually spoken mostly about microphones and audio, and that wasn't deliberate, but it shows you how important audio is. That audio is far more important than video. But just in our final few minutes, I do want to talk a little bit more about camera tips and particularly getting in front of the camera, because sometimes when we press that go live button, get in front of the camera, our brains turn to mush and we're a shivering wreck. Any tips on how we can become more confident in front of the camera?
Yeah. Not worry so much about it, for sure. And also just some little technical things. Be well lit. When you're well lit, you look better. I mean, it's kind of an obvious thing, but when you have bad light, please destroy your ring light, especially if you don't have your ring light around your lens. If your ring light is simply a circular light pointing down at you from above, you're not using it properly, and you shouldn't be using it anyway. Get a good 3-point lighting system. It'll cost you, what, $120 maybe? Have the light set up so that your key light is 100%, your fill light is 50%, your backlight is 50%. They're all aimed at your head and your face. Do that right. Do that right. And you'd be amazed how much less worried you're going to be about how you look. Once you have a camera that you're happy with, use it, get used to it, and learn how to work it. As you sit, don't worry so much about how you look, but rather worry about your content, and you're going to look even better.
There you go. Don't worry. And it sounds such a simple thing, but it's difficult to do. We're I don't know. We're a nation or a club of warriors, I think, when it comes to live video, and that can really get in the way of you being yourself and delivering to your audience. So, well, thank you so much, David. We're out of time. Just before we finish, how can people find out more about you and tell us a little bit more about what you're working on? I know you have a couple of apps as well that people can check out.
Yeah. Real quick, if you want to get me, I'm at voheroes.com. That's VOHEROES.com. It's where I teach people voiceover. I teach them how to narrate audiobooks. I teach them how to do commercials. I teach them how to build a business doing voice work. And the things I'm working on right now, when you go into your trailer, there's a stack of papers about that big when you're booked on something, and half of them are non-disclosure agreements.
That's fun and games. Thank you for that. So I've just put that up on there. I was just typing very quickly in the background. I hope I've spelt that right. Have I spelt that right?
Yeah, perfect.
All right. There we go. We've got a little slash at the end there. But anyway, voheroes.com. Thank you so much. And of course, you're on all the socials. So just what's your social media handle on all
almost all of them? In fact, all of them that I'm aware of, except maybe Facebook, because they don't do that, is at DH Lawrence XVII. So Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Clubhouse, DH Lawrence XVII.
Awesome. Well, thank you, David. Steve says thank you for the show. Thank you so much for watching. It's been great to be with you guys and for the amazing questions we've had today. So thank you for that. And thank you, David. Awesome. Well, it's just to say we'll be back next week. We're live every single Monday. And of course, do check out the other Restream shows. There's a show every single day and on loads of different topics to do with live streaming and confidence and tech. You name it, we've got it. So thank you so much for that. And just to say, I encourage you to increase your confidence, improve your communication, and optimize your mindset so that you can go live with confidence. See you soon. Toodaloo.
Thanks for watching the Go Live with Confidence show with Ian Anderson Gray, helping you get over the fear, improve your communication, and optimize your mindset so that you can go live with confidence. Check out Restream and take it for a test drive at iag.me/Restream. And until next time, toodaloo.